say that better than I can.
They're not big issues. They're mostly issues that I think could allow me more understanding if we discussed it more in depth. The rest of it I thought was pretty understandable, but there was just those points I thought I'd lean into.
Yeah. It was a long list, maybe a dozen bullet points in Glenn's summary.
Yeah, it's quite long, quite extensive. And I read it pretty carefully.
Yeah.
And
Welcome, Josh. Welcome, Alex.
So I'm still looking pretty ragged.
So you are.
I don't have this. I don't have this problem.
I suppose the three of us are all part of a generation that is a bit unfamiliar with shaving.
With what?
Shaving.
Changing?
Shaving.
Oh, shaving.
I don't mean facial shaving.
Yeah. Yeah, I started letting my beard grow, I think, in college. Just took too much time and wasn't really necessary, or at least in grad school, I guess.
You still trim your beard.
I trim it, yeah. Yeah, I do trim it about once a month or so.
Yeah, this is the carefully, shall I say, don't care look.
Yeah. Yeah, but going for a year and a half without that was weird.
I'm gonna turn off my camera just for about 5 minutes. I just have to finish getting my brisket ready for the oven. But I
brisket over.
Brisket
takes priority over everything.
Auga.
Is that your Rosh Hashanah brisket?
Yes, yes.
Sounds like a classical Jewish holiday meal, brisket.
Immediately goes to the top of the priority list, always.
Which dog is that today?
This is Gaia.
Gaia
and her brother had a birthday party yesterday, so 7 Goldens got together at the park yesterday.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
So they're twins, so.
Actually, she's going to be 2 in about 3 weeks, but it was most effective to have it on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, sure. So, but they all kind of look alike to me.
She is the tiny, skinny one. All the others are, oh man, you should see 2 of her older brothers. They are literally double wide, if not triple wide. They're like over 100 pounds now.
Yeah. £100, that is big.
It's a huge golden retriever. In fact, it's unhealthy.
I would think so, yeah.
Gaia's dad, Zeus, only got to be 90, and he was still lean and long and healthy. He did not look fat at all. But these 2, over 100 pounds, literally. I mean, I could barely get my arms around them.
Wow.
Yeah. Carl.
Boo.
Been a while, huh?
Yep. I took 3 courses over the summer. Actually 4, but I completed 3.
So how much longer for your degree?
Hoping to be done by the end of next year.
Awesome. I don't think I've actually spoken to you since the change of administration. Does it feel different?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really interesting with all the stuff going on. So.
Well, does it feel like there's more sanity, or does it still feel like same old insanity.
It seems better. Yeah, it'll be interesting if like October 1st, they're going to start having some voluntary going back to the office. So, I mean, people haven't even been in the build. Most of us haven't even been in the building in 18 months. So, and then getting telework arrangements set up by the end of the year. And then January 4th is when people will be back in the office the way they, pending any other variants. Ugh.
Well, there will be. If it was Delta, there will be Epsilon, there'll be Gamma, there'll be blah, 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 blah.
It's kind of scary looking at some of those college football games with tens of thousands of people in the stands.
Super spreader events, yes. In fact, did you guys see my post earlier this week that I wanted to start a fund? I want to start a fund that'll do two things. It'll provide either free or discounted tickets one way to anybody who wants to go to Florida if they promise to stay there. Okay. Unvaccinated, okay. And two, I want to plan a whole bunch of parties, all over the place every night of the week. Okay. Lots of booze, lots of entertainment, everything.
Yeah, I saw that. But I didn't interpret the way you just now characterized it.
No, it was pretty specific.
Actually start a fund for real.
Yeah.
Sam Jim Jones Han.
No, it's going to be called the Party Fund, okay? The Vaccine Protest Party Fund.
Why don't
recording? You do remember that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not promote a what's the celebration in the desert?
Oh,
Black
yeah.
Rock,
Burning Man.
Burning Man. Why not promote a vaccine-free man?
That's right.
Gathering in the desert.
No, they should gather in Florida.
Man.
We already had that in Sturgis.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Walking backwards, man.
Yeah.
There's a similar lesser one. I think it's in New Mexico. And it's not as prominent as Burning Man, but it's a kind of a similar annual ritual. They do burn in effigy some mythological character.
No, literally. Would you guys not donate to a fund like that?
I think it'd be unethical, but it'd be amusing. It'd be amusing to write a story about it and sort of
I
imagine.
want you to write a song parody on that one.
Well,
I would donate money to a fund that was examining the difference between the Swiss result of the lockdown and the British result of the lockdown, because that looks strange on a graph. Seasonally adjusted.
Oh man, I'm disappointed. You guys don't think that's a good idea.
well, I can see writing a ballad that kind of, is a send-up of the idea. But being a send-up, it wouldn't suggest it's a good thing to actually do in real life.
I'm just being magnanimous. Come on.
I have to be careful when I propose something to make clear that I'm being jocular and not serious.
Magdrama-analysis.
Say what?
Magnalysis or magdrama-analysis.
Magnalysis or what was this?
I put the drama. I added the drama bit because it's not a scientific inquiry.
Yeah, whenever I have an intractable problem which science and academic can't solve, I reprise it as a silly melodrama, opera, like an emotional driven opera, and just treat it as a piece of fantasy art. And I'm about to do that on the latest episode of my life. I'm about to take a real life episode and turn it into an opera or something like that.
What pray tell is your latest?
It has to do with Dave Snowden. You remember Dave Snowden associated with
I saw some of the repartee.
Yeah. So he and I are at odds.
Mamma mia.
He and I are at odds over whether Wikipedia has a realistic governance model or not. And I identified the governance model, not just by myself, a whole lot of us identified the governance model as very primitive. What we call a pre-Hammurabic ad hoc ochlocracy. In other words, a tribal ochlocracy like you find in Afghanistan, just a bunch of little cliques with their own concept of how they rule their little domains. And he thinks that it's a perfectly fine governance model, nothing wrong with it. And that I don't have any evidence to support my position.
Actually, he was just saying that you haven't provided enough specifics on your position.
The specifics is about 20 megabytes scattered hither and yon over 3 years and dozens of websites and hundreds, maybe thousands of pages. And it literally takes years to pour over this massive amount of data.
Yeah, but unless
give them the
it's secret,
summaries.
why not provide it? Just to make your point to Dave.
30 megabytes.
Why
Yeah.
not? That's nothing. That's nothing these days.
Well, maybe not in video, but if it's in text on pages. And
It's still nothing. It can be searched in like fractions of milliseconds.
oh, I gave him the places where he can find it all splayed out, but he
Yeah,
doesn't
but
read
you're
it.
asking him to do work. So
Yes, I'm asking him to do what he promotes, which is, what's it called? Analyzing warm data to make sense. It took us years to go over the warm data and to extract the sense making out of it. And I told him what the extraction was, the sense making, which other people have said, that he wants to see the warm data. Well, it's scattered hither and yon. I gave him several summary pages. The last really big one that hit the mainstream media was written up in BuzzFeed and Slate magazine. And the author who told the story in a short article, Slate magazine, says that the whole story is 500,000 words, just on that one case, 500,000 words. It's longer than what was it, the Hunger Games or whatever he compared it to. I mean, how are you going to present that? You're going to spoon feed 500,000 words to Dave Snowden on Facebook? You got to be
I
kidding.
think you're objecting now, Barry.
Objecting?
Yes,
I'm objecting to it. What he requested is unrealistic.
I doubt it. I don't think so at all.
Well, I defy anybody to pour over, 20 megabytes of
So the point
text.
is, Barry, you've done it. So if you've done it, you've got a good, sensible summary of it that should be linked to details in that 20 or 30 meg.
It is, and I gave
That's
him
what he's
those.
looking for.
It is, and I give him. But here's part of the problem. Because I was attacking.
Barry, you're objecting.
Okay, I'm objecting. Part of the problem, Sam, is that they oversighted the evidence. Some of the evidence that, because they blocked me, that means that the stuff that I wrote up as evidence, you have to go to great lengths to find it because it's blocked, it's redacted, it's oversighted. I had to migrate it off of Wikipedia to other sites.
But
But,
you've already done all that, haven't you?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So you've got links to all that, right?
yes. And I gave him those links. I gave him something like a dozen links.
Anyway, I'll go on record as saying I still regularly contribute to Wikimedia Foundation.
Welcome
That
to
doesn't
this.
mean that I understand their governance principles, but
Well,
donation.
it's a pre-Hammurabic ad hoc ochlocracy. And I didn't make that up. Those terms of art came from other Wikipedia editors who had found the right terminology to characterize the governance model. Ochlocracy is just a fancy word for mob rule. Did Joshua raise his hand or was I just,
Me.
okay.
I'm just saying hi. Good to see
Oh,
everybody.
you did raise your hand. Just to say
Alex
hello.
is raising his hand.
Hi.
I was going to ask you if it was possible for Dave Snowden to compromise. Or you and him both to compromise, like meeting halfway on the bridge?
There needs to be a mediator.
I think compromise is the wrong model.
By the way,
elaborate.
Nora sent a note to me saying, what the hell is all this about? Why is my name being mentioned? And I said, because analyzing warm data and making sense making is what the two of you guys are all about. And also stage theory, because she's busy with stage theory. I don't know if you know that controversy. And governance models went through stage theories over 5,000 years, starting from before the introduction of the rule of law up into modern times. And Wikipedia's governance model is stage 0. It predates the introduction of the rule of law. Has anybody ever looked at the actual Code of Hammurabi from nearly 5,000 years ago?
Are you talking about the eye for an eye?
No. Code of Hammurabi, the civil criminal law that was written in stone tablets, the oldest existing stone tablet version of secular law.
No.
Well, the very first, there's like 282 laws that Hammurabi wrote down. The very first law, number 1, is
Don't
It
get
is-
caught.
it is illegal in Hammurabi's code to ban somebody without due process. It's a capital offense. Very first law, it's a capital offense to ban somebody without due process. They violate that routinely on Wikipedia. Routinely. The very first article of the US Constitution says no bills of attainder. You know what a bill of attainder is? That's where you pass a law declaring an individual to be an outlaw. In Britain, they had monarchical bills of attainder and parliamentary bills of attainder, where either the king or the parliament could pass a law declaring Sam Han a criminal, period. That's outlawed in the US Constitution. That's another routine thing they do in Wikipedia. Bills of attainder, they call it banning.
Now Joshua has his hand up and mine's after him. You want me to go first?
Yeah, I didn't see your hand up, Stacy. Go
No,
ahead.
you, because I didn't put it up. You were first. Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, I was just going to say, when it comes down to this game of laws and the law that precedes the law that precedes the law that goes to the Mann Act that says that you can't go across state, blah, 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 blah. It just makes me think of, it's just a big fucking game. Like, don't get your panties in a bunch, just change it again and then let it get changed again. It's just a game. It doesn't matter. It's going to continually, who can out logic the logic and then set the precedent that can change the thing that changes the mind of the court system that is changing the actual precedent that was set in the beginning when it said you can't do this, but you can because of the loophole of the, it's a big game.
It is a game.
Yeah.
It's been called a game.
What
So
I
either play it or don't play it. That's my point.
I stopped, as soon as I realized it was a game, I bailed. Took about 2.5 or 3 years for me to conclude it was a game and that it wasn't a governance model, it was a game. Larry Sanger calls it a game. There was a documentary that was called The Wikipedia Game that didn't get enough funding to get made, but that was going to be the name of the documentary. Stacy?
It's not,
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody today and I was saying that in our country, the first thing that has to be changed is our court systems, because you can't, an average citizen cannot really go to get their rights restored without having a lot of money, a lawyer. So, I mean, the game is really rigged.
Right.
So, when you talk about that first law about banning somebody, look what's happened. I mean, look at the Texas law and the idea that now you're getting the citizens to all find, the person doing this illegal act. I mean, this is really big. This whole system needs to be changed. This is not, whenever we see these, atrocities in the news of people's rights being taken away, you always hear the other side saying, well, they can go to court and fight for their rights, but it's not even close to a level playing field. The courts should be for the little guy to get what they need, not for the big guy to keep you where you are. I mean, look at Trump and all the lawsuits he would start just to keep people tied up.
Right.
So I think if we don't look at the court system and look to change that, I think everything else is useless.
Yeah.
And Sam has his hand up.
Well, one point I wanted to make is it's a game until lives are affected, and lives are
Lives are
definitely
affected.
by some laws. And so,
Lives are affected.
so that's why I say you can treat it as
But
a
that's
game.
part of the
but
game.
It's a game that actually affects lives.
It
And then the
does.
second
And
thing is the quote unquote justice system in the US as I understand it, and Doug, can you please confirm, is an adversarial system. You know, it's proponent versus, you know, defendant or whatever it is. What is it? The plea, whoever it is, the
plaintiff.
pleading the case, plaintiff, right? Versus defendant, and it's not really truth seeking.
No,
And I think, you know, justice that's not truth seeking just doesn't seem like justice. It just seems like, you know, who's got the bigger stick, who's got more money, who's got a louder voice, who's got more time, who's got more patience, who's got more thugs, you know, that's what wins.
Yeah.
It's not a justice system.
correct.
So,
And there are people in Wikipedia who admit that there are a few ethical people who will come out and say what Sam just said, but they're in the minority.
Josh, you have your hand up.
Trying to unmute. Sorry, the thing wouldn't slide up on the phone. I just kept I wrote a book when I was 5 about this whole game and this whole thing. And I tried to break it down. And I think in over a longer period of time, love always wins, meaning helping other people wins. But first, a lot of people have to get killed and a lot of dismay and problems until humans go, no, we can't do that. We can't kill everybody. We have to help each other. And then they do it for a while and they go, hey, have you ever tried killing everybody? And then they start killing everybody again. And then, no, we can't do that. Then they help each other again. And it's like this game of, do we love each other? Like, that's the way I see the game, is just, do we love each other enough not to power over each other and hurt each other and make men and women and children cry because you've hurt to the point, hopefully not, where you actually kill the other person. Like, literally kill them, you know, like, I'm a big fan. I'm a web developer. RSS feeds is a very important part of my life. And the person who invented that took his own life because the government system pushed him to a point where he felt he had no way out. And that was a game that they played and they won. He killed himself.
No.
And now that's not talked about. RSS feeds, it's not an open internet, it's a closed internet for billions of dollars where you can control the flow of information. And if you want your feed to be seen by everybody, you either get on the Chinese TikTok or you pay Google or you pay Facebook for advertisement. And that's a huge game that is grabbing attention and making trillions of dollars throughout the world. And it's a real thing. And I think it's a love game. I think if we don't love ourselves first enough to care about other people, and that's what I think the Buddha was really talking about being compassionate. And I think that's what Jesus was talking about, of forgiving each other for playing the game wrong, like forgiving Dave Snowden for being ignorant and not actually looking at the material you provided him, and for not caring about what you think about governance, Barry. You know, forgive him. He knows other things. He's not involved in your desire to make it a better system. He thinks it's good enough. It works for him, so fuck you, Barry. It doesn't work for you. Sorry. You know, that's sorry to speak so frankly. I just
at one time, people looked at Gregory Bateson's biography in Wikipedia, where Nora's mentioned, because they mention, you know, the children. And Nora doesn't not have a biography on Wikipedia, although she's probably prominent enough to deserve one. And so a few people who knew Nora thought, maybe we should craft a biography of Nora. And Dave Snowden was in the loop on that discussion. And the bottom line was they decided not to try to write a biography of her because, well, for lots of reasons, but because biographies of living people are very controversial and full of, you know, baloney and fighting. And they made the right choice. They decided it was not in anybody's good interest to try to write a biography of her and publish it on Wikipedia. if they had, they would have run into a lot of the same stuff I ran into. I was trying to fix a bad biography of a colleague of mine from the media lab at MIT.
So the challenge that I see all the time in every situation, whether it's a little one, a small, big one, is that we see something that's wrong. And the first response is to get rid of it totally. Don't fix it. Don't try to, tweak little things. Get rid of it. It's bad. And all we're doing is shifting the power from one end to the other end. And it's consistent.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it so clear as I have this past couple of years being engaged on Facebook and
Yep.
seeing the different opposing groups. And if we don't work on that, we're doomed. And the last thing I will say is the way to do that is moderation and balance within ourselves too. So, just to keep in mind that for everything, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So understand that however angry or frustrated you are, that energy has an opposing energy.
Exactly so. In fact, that's one of the conclusions I drew. I said, what are the uses of Wikipedia besides its advertised intended use? If you're a dramatist and you're going to write a drama with a bunch of imaginary storybook characters, and so you're making up a character for a drama and you want to find out who would be the worst opponent, the worst adversary of your storybook character, the easiest way to get the answer to that is go into Wikipedia, create a character that instantiates your drama character, and immediately the adversaries will show up. And I refer to this as Jimbo's unintended drama engine. If you want to test a dramatic character, go into Wikipedia with that character, and you will instantly find all your adversaries within like a week. That's one of the things you can actually use it for, and a lot of people do.
But I don't understand. Sam's hand is up, but
It is.
I just want to say for the record, I don't know why anybody would want to approach it that way. And that's all I'll say. Sam, go ahead.
I just had a little bit of a personal story because, when Doug Engelbart was living, he absolutely did have a bio on Wikipedia. And it's pretty extensive. It talks about his entire history, including the discovery of the mouse and NLS and augment and everything else. But what was interesting is I got into a minor little Wikipedia war/battle with one of his daughters because they were, and now that Doug is passed, I guess I'm going to reveal some of this. They were actually trying to get conservatorship of Doug's estate. So they wanted to have him declared suffering from Alzheimer's, where he had actually not been formally diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I think it requires a doctor to actually declare a diagnosis. So they tried to put that information into Doug's Wikipedia bio. And I took it out and they put it in, and I took it out and they put it back in, and I took it out. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. And Doug's, by the way, not the only live person at the time whose bio was on Wikipedia. There's plenty of live people with bio.
Quarter million biographies of living people.
Yeah.
BLP is the shorthand. 250,000.
Yeah. So anyway, it can be used for that purpose. And, as a moderator, any third party that did not know the specifics of that particular incident wouldn't be able to actually know how to moderate that, it seemed to me, or no one actually effectively did. I essentially, after some number of time, I started checking back less and less frequently to make the correction. But now Doug's passed, so, I don't spend much time on his bio anymore.
It was probably against at least some Wikipedia rules for both you and his daughters to edit his biography. Them because they're related to him, so they're ineligible to write the biography. And maybe you because you were an affiliate of his.
I'm just a third party who's actually worked with him.
Exactly, and that also, see, I was an academic who worked with another academic at MIT, and they said, "Oh, you can't edit Rosalind Picard's biography because you're a friend
Is
of
that
hers."
an actual rule? Because I think that's extreme.
Here's the thing. There's a whole collection of rules which are ad hoc and they're mutually contradictory. In fact, there's one of the rules is called ignore all rules.
Wait, are
Whole
you talking
collection
about Wikipedia rules?
Yeah.
If they're ad hoc, that means what? They're not written down?
No, it means that they're just created out of thin air at random and without consideration of whether they conflict with any other.
Well, then that's a great system, Barry. Just go in there and create another ad hoc rule.
That's what turns it into worse than a game, because at least a game has a set of rules which are not mutually inconsistent.
If you're saying that's part of the rules of the game, go ahead and play the game.
That's not true.
In fact, I pointed out that ignore all rules was put in there specifically because of biographies of living people. Because one of the rules is if you're having an edit war, a ping pong, you can only revert each other 3 times. After 3 reversals, you have to stop reversing and take it elsewhere, but not in biographies. So ignore all rules is ignore that one for biographies.
I don't know which Alex is Josh, which one came first.
And then
Alex?
Doug, I'd like you to weigh in after they go, because I really appreciate you stepping back and not exerting your authority, but I want to hear what you have to say.
What?
I don't have authority, but Alex, go ahead, and then Josh.
Perceived authority.
Okay, is it possible to upload the Zoom content to Wikipedia? We can post the Zoom session to Wikipedia. Since we're mentioning Wikipedia and they're not in the conversation.
You can mention them in a talk page, whether that will be received well, who knows?
Josh?
Yeah, I'm just lowering my hand, trying to be respectful. There we go. When's the last time, Barry, that you've gotten on Wikipedia, like in a pseudonym or something? Like, are they allowing you to even go in there and see what the latest is? Because I had a gentleman in the Metacogs last year spend 3 months teaching us Wikipedia, and it looks like they're trying to create debates on the page that we're talking about here, so that other people that are coming in there to edit can read all those debates. They're trying to do better, is what I'm trying to say. Is
anybody can read Wikipedia without even logging in. You don't need to log in to read it. You don't even need
the back end where they have all these new rules. When's the last time you looked at what's going on Wikipedia of the changes?
Well, technically last week, but only old stuff, not current stuff. Dave asked me to find him some stuff, so I had to go find the stuff that was the administrator's notice board and the request for comment stuff. So I was digging up stuff from 13 years ago, which is an ARBCOM. I had to dig up the ARBCOM case for him. So I looked at it. I have not edited under a registered name since I was banned 13 years ago or 14 years ago, whenever it was.
I would like to get the gentleman that was giving us these tutorials, that was working really closely with Wikipedia, together with you, to see if a lot of those things have changed since that situation happened. Just because the way he showed me Wikipedia was there is a system of keeping track of the debates, and you can write the conversation of why this is unfair and why these rules, and those, if any other editors have to go in, those notes are there, and then someone else can challenge. So there's like a challenging system where someone can say, hey, I challenge this and here's the reason why, and I cite this, and then someone else has to go in there and say that, and then someone else that has the power can update according to those debates that are on the page that's in question.
There are talk pages, and talk pages have archives that can go back for decades. And you can go back and read the talk pages unless they're oversighted. And if they're oversighted or redacted, then you can't, nobody can get them except very high level officials of Wikipedia. So for example, a lot of stuff about my own experience is redacted and oversighted. I can't even go back and read it. And if I didn't save it on my own hard drive, I've lost it. So I've got something I would like to show as evidence to Dave, but I can't get it because it's been oversighted.
And the person that's oversighted, can you reach them and can you
I
talk to
don't,
that
I
person?
don't know. I don't know who oversighted it.
Gotcha.
I can prove that it's oversighted because I can see references to a page which is now red linked. And somebody says, oh, this evidence that so-and-so compiled for an Orbicom case existed, and here's the link to it, but the link is red link, and you go to it and it says this page doesn't exist anymore. Well, it's been oversighted.
Sam, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to use that one case that Barry just described as really foundational for why the Engelbartian view of don't delete is so valuable. If you delete, then citations no longer work. You can actually render people to look silly or irrational if you remove what they were commenting on.
Yes.
And you make their comments look like they're out of thin air or about something else, which is why there's a very strong Engelbartian notion. You don't delete stuff. You can have versions, but the old stuff must still be accessible. That, I think, is the Engelbartian view. And
you know why things were oversighted, Sam? This is interesting, why they were oversighted. It's, first of all, you're not supposed to have sock puppets. You can use a pseudonym, not your real name. You don't have to disclose your real name. But if you're using more than one account without disclosing your real name, that's called a sock puppet. And it's one of the rules on Wikipedia is you're not supposed to connect a pseudonym with a real person who runs that character. And the main reason for oversighting is when administrators who were corrupt had the real name disclosed. And anytime there's a page that discloses the real name of a corrupt administrator, that gets oversighted because it's a revelation of a real name.
Otherwise known as doxing these days. But I think
it's like doxing, yeah.
Well, anyway, just to finish the thought on Engelbart, I just wanted to make sure that Colin is listening, because Colin and I have had this running argument about whether past posts can be edited and or deleted. And this is case in point that I really want to lay out here that addresses that particular point.
Yeah.
The second one is your mention of pseudonyms, sock puppets.
Sock puppets and
pseudonyms. And I'm open to being educated otherwise, but as far as I can tell, there's only one valid use for anonymous access, and that's if you are being oppressed and if you're actually likely to be under political or physical oppression or harm.
That's not the reason they do it on Wikipedia. They have a completely different reason.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, in social media, since it's so easy to not show up as yourself,
yeah,
I would prefer that we adopt that rule, because I definitely understand there are people from countries that would be persecuted if their identities were known. And I think that's a valid use of anonymous contribution.
Yeah,
I don't know that there are others, so I really like to know whether you guys think there are others.
Well, it's being exposed as a fraud. So being exposed as a fraud is one reason that people don't want to be revealed as to who they really are.
And that's one thing I would support you with, is that's a case for revelation.
Right.
Of fraudsters.
Fraudster, exactly. And I can give you, in fact, there was a case just last March about a fraudster who was editing under a made-up name, and they were editing articles about themselves. Or at least that's the allegation.
Colin, your hand is up.
Thanks, Doug. Nice to see you, Carl. Haven't seen you in a while. Everybody. Yeah, my disagreements a lot of times have to do with nuance, not with principle. I'm very for keeping the record, and in a GitHubian style, where people can actually collaborate and work on that record, not just have it, but use it. So, and using it is what matters most to me, because if you can't use it, what good is the record? So my complaints are all about usability, and I'll just leave it there. All of it's nuance, and I would just leave the question as well. How do you decide between who is at risk and who is not? That's so subjective. I don't think you can pull that binary decision out of a hat. And Barry speaks to that with the gradient of justice, I think. Like, how do we distribute that?
Anyway, it's a 5,000-year-old controversy, and it survives to this, literally to this very day, especially on the internet.
Well, I think the human part of that equation is not have people in power that haven't demonstrated the ability to moderate their own behavior and be more objective. So basically what I'm saying is we kind of push for people who are willing to bend the rules. Those are the people that make it to the top. Those are the people that make it in powers, in positions of authority. And we are aiding them. We do that.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example, Stacy. In 2005, when Wikipedia began to become a very prominent website, there was a surge in controversies and scandals about the time that Wikipedia became prominent. And they began in roughly 2005. The second one that happened that's listed in 2005 is Jimmy Wales editing his own biography, partly to downplay the role of Larry Sanger as a co-creator, and partly to eliminate from his own biography parts of his own personal past that he didn't want revealed. And he was caught. And he defended in 2005 his right to edit his own biography. To this day, he still says, back in 2005, I was right to edit my own biography.
I posted a link to the history flow that was created that has a graphic representation of MediaWiki. And there's vertical lines like on abortion page where people are just going back and forth, deleting the whole page and stuff, but it's got some interesting trends, that type of thing that I think that's been gone for a while now, but it's pretty cool.
Sounds like Jimmy Wales is another case of special pleading. The devil likes hot bubble gum.
It's quite interesting in cultural anthropology and sociology. I mean, Howard Rheingold, who was writing about the internet way back in the 90s or even in the 80s, was one of the first people to point out this collection of problems that he predicted and was already happening back in the late 80s. And there's now lots of people who do cultural anthropology with respect to the internet, what's happening in terms of the sociology of the internet. This is these are courses in universities that use Wikipedia as an example. You know, there's lots of articles in the mainstream press over the years about it. This is not a new story.
Josh and then Alex.
Go ahead, Alex.
You sure? I was thinking about the influence that people have who have a banner to hold up or something to post on a social platform. It's the agenda, you know. What's their intention? What have they got to gain? Why can't they bring something to the party that's a unifying value for everybody to share? It's not. It doesn't carry the baggage with it of political leanings to left or right. It's universal love, universal peace, universal truth. That's the secret to uniting communities and different cultures and different divinity belief systems, theologies. So, you know, the sorting out the baggage from the agendas is so tricky on platforms like Wikipedia. It's just insane. It's, I think smaller groups that are more intimate have a better chance of getting to the factual information that has more value to the participants involved. At least, can we come up with an idea that brings us closer to the fact that most 80% of us have the same opinion on what's valuable to a group, what's valuable to a community over.
Josh?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Was listening last week to the CEO of Google, the ex-CEO, Eric Schmidt, and he was talking about how they built the not just the culture, but how they actually built the company of Google and how they recruited people from Stanford to come in. And one of the things that he said that I thought was quite brilliant is they did the 80-20 principle of 80% of the time you have to work on the projects that you're paid for. And 20% of the time you can work on something that's a passion project that you love. And if you prove that that holds weight and other people want to work on that project with you, then that becomes part of the company. And I think that's one of the reasons why Google grew so fast. And I think if we allow people to work on things that are not just their job, but ethical things like changing Wikipedia or allocate a percentage of our time globally to making the world a better place, then that would allow us to make the world a better place, meaning the power over each, you have to work for me, you do what I say, doesn't give people the time to fix the things that they want to fix or give that leisure time to make the world a better place. And I think that would be a nice campaign if we gave every person on this planet some time to do the things that they want to do until the point where it comes to 30%, 40%, 50%. And then at some point, not that this would be a utopian society, but if we had 100% of our time to do whatever we felt we were passionate about without having to worry about making a living for our families and taking care of ourselves, then we would have a global society that works for 100% of the people. That's just an idea I have. I'm complete.
Back when I first started and got into a controversy with literally within days, within the same day that I began, and people wanted to know why I was there. And I said, and you can find this in the literature, I wrote it multiple times, my express objective in going into Wikipedia was to promote accuracy, excellence, and ethics in online media, specifically within Wikipedia's articles and specifically within biographies of living people. Accuracy, excellence, and ethics. Jimbo Wales, when he was finally drawn into the controversy, came out and said expressly to me, ethics is beyond the scope of the project. Ethics is beyond the scope of the project, where he's referring to Wikimedia at large.
Colin?
Yeah. What was I going to say? Something about you wait, you get thinking about what other people are saying, and then you forget what you're going to say. You have to really write it down. I did write down sponsored lobbying. I guess what I'm getting on about is the question. Yeah. Alex said all. Joshua said all. I agree with Doug's all in the generic sense. All of us or none of us. But all of us doing what is the distinction. So it's not all of us doing the same thing. I don't agree with that. Or being the same or one philosophy. Barry and I are talking about a little bit about that. And I think people have philosophies that they think what's better, but from what I understand, there is no one perfect philosophy, silver bullet, that if you achieve it, everything will be better. In fact, that would be a bad outcome to actually achieve a pure philosophy. I'm not sure about that. It's just one of those things I've thought that the messiness and the inefficiencies in the system are part of its garbage collection and health, perhaps. I don't know. Like sleeping. Why do we sleep? Seems to be a wasted, garbage, inefficient thing. Weird stuff happens when why is that necessary? Wake up happy, wake up crying, it's the weirdest thing ever. And then you shake it off in 10 minutes, like, what was that all about? Right? And then you can maybe relate it to something, but it's a whole different world of experience. So the waking world and the sleeping world. And I guess the reality is it's all the sleeping world because it's all imagined orders or experiments. So when I came here, originally I was saying, okay, what game are we playing today? As if everything in life as a game has consequences that are real to people. I'm not saying game as in Monopoly. That's a I don't know. That's a entertainment game as opposed to a life experiment game. So let's qualify things, although labels are dangerous, apparently. So when I say game, I am saying life's game, and the fairness game. Like Stacy speaks, and I hear her say, "Wouldn't it be nice if everybody could speak with fair conversation framework?" Like, what would that mean? Fair conversation framework. That means where the flow of intention is, and who's trying to screw who, and why, or who's trying to help who and why. And so, Barry was giving us the flow of the Wikipedia. So it's this reach better. And I think Josh just said it. If we could, again, all something and a universal, I don't know, maybe you could repeat that again, Josh. I just put a question there. Does anybody actually think that world coexistence and peace, 100% peace, no war, everybody's happy, agreeing with everybody? It's great when we can build high fences and ignore each other until somebody looks over the fence. But how can we do it without fences or low fences so they're actually aware of the other? Because that's what happens. The other comes over and it's like, oh my God, that's something different. I'm scared of that. Let's get rid of it. Oh, wait, we can't get rid of it. I think Josh was just talking about this. Okay, let's not do that. Oh, what are all these things? Oh, let's just try to get rid of it. Oh, wait, no, we can't just get rid of it. So, yeah, I won't ask my other question because it would just derail what I just said. So do we actually think that a universal how did I ask the question? Let's vote. Do you think that universal anything, peace, is possible? And I hear universal talk, and sure, let's point towards a happy place, like all of us or none of us. But by God, when I get to the boat, I don't want everybody be getting in that same boat. So what do you mean by all of us or none of us? It matters.
Stacy.
Yeah, so the initial question that I heard Colin ask was, what if this all of us thing? And yes, all of us are included, but no, all of us should not be doing the same thing. So anybody that thinks that ethics doesn't belong in every part of human behavior should not be in a position of arbitrator. Those two things don't match well with each other. But that doesn't mean there's not another position for that person that they're perfectly suited for.
I'm not talking about position. I'm saying like just trying to answer the question, what is better? Like try to think from the United Nations 17 SDGs point of view, or from any point of view. As soon as you add another culture, like who are you trying to coexist with? Your own town, your own tribe, your own church? Or are you actually thinking global? Because once you think global, all bets are off. There is no all anymore. And to think there is one is foolhardy.
Well, I'm actually thinking local, because if you can't accomplish locally everybody being included and running smoothly, how could you possibly think you can do it globally? And I feel like I'm constantly trying to say, well, let's start with me. You start with you. What do we have to do? And I keep hearing, oh, let's fix them. We haven't fixed ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's fine. But fix yourself.
No, it's not fine. Because if you haven't fixed yourself, stop telling other people how they should do it. If I haven't figured out for myself how to do it. But here's the thing, Colin. A lot of times.
I'm saying what you said is valid. Let me restate. What you said is valid.
Thank you.
What you said is valid. It's a fine place to start a discussion.
Okay.
That is fine. That's what I mean, but that is fine. Let's continue the discussion, lady.
Okay, so the next step of that discussion, if I were starting it, is what I keep trying to say is, why are we giving away our power in terms of influence? Or I said to Doug pushed back on, I'm not in charge here. And I said, it was perceived. That's not his fault. That's our fault. If we're deciding, well, he's in charge, so we have to defer to him, we're doing that. Now, for me personally, I choose to do that because I trust him in that regard. When I no longer trust him, then I might say, I'm not listening to that, and I'll speak up. Often, we know that we're following somebody that we don't totally agree with ethically, and we do it anyway. Well, no, I'm not going to say wait, because I think I'm pretty good at not doing that. I have done that in the past. That's how I can recognize it. And just a real quick example I used, somebody like Chef Ramsay. We watch Chef Ramsay, and everybody knows who he is, basically. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy. I hear he does charitable stuff, but we watch him on TV humiliating and degrading people and totally getting away with it. And instead of speaking up, say, Chef, why do you need to do that? Like, what's going on with you? We rush to get online to get reservations because we can't wait to support his restaurant. Why? It's not why can't we, and I'm not saying turn against him. I'm not saying don't go, but I'm saying speak up and say, hey, that's not really acceptable. And we don't do that to people that have any kind of status, whether that be real or perceived, or, if it's influence or money, whatever it is, because we're all protecting ourselves, because I don't want to be the scapegoat. And trust me, I know that one very well.
Alex?
If I came to work at KFC with my own bag of herbs and spices, it wouldn't work, would it?
No.
It had to be the secret ingredients that were devised by the original cook,
The Colonel.
the colonel, yeah. So, when I show up to a congregation of people trying to coexist, I look for the herbs and spices. I don't try and add my own or insist that mine are better. Maybe I should make them available somewhere with a link so that people can look at them and think and try them. So experiment and say, oh, maybe these are nice, maybe they're not. If I don't like them, I'll go somewhere else. But if you're making them available is the important bit, I think is important. We've got to do this together in a way that makes things available. Over.
Stacy and then Colin.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, that's one of the things that I really liked about Global Challenges and why I've been here for so many years, because once I came and I was watching to see what was going on, there was a real invitation to bring yourself and to add to the pot. And I have to say it was a little confusing because when I went to other groups, I wasn't aware that that culture was not necessarily the same. So there was a learning curve, which wasn't that fun. But again, what I like about Global Challenges, this group and the people in it, is that they do want inclusion, and that is inclusion of ideas. And I trust that even when one of us veers off the path, because we're all human, the culture of the group steps in to protect the integrity of it. I guess that's the best way I could say it.
Colin?
Yes, again, I'm very, very present in what other people are saying and forgetting what it is I want to say.
That's a good sign.
Well, no, it's not, because it means I forgot to write it down again.
But it means you were present.
Well, I'm usually present, but I'm not writing it down. I'm fussing with my hair.
And it may also mean that what was living for you in your head didn't carry the importance and significance and weight relative to whatever was truly generatively living in present moment as shared by other people.
Yes and no. I definitely
just a possibility.
Yeah, what's living here is obviously new, and I'm trying to add it to what I understand. I'm using as few Lego pieces as possible to not make it complicated. So I'm pretty well, making the same square shapes. So what I've forgotten is not something that hasn't been said before. That's first of all, I hope. I just hope I'm getting better at saying it, and maybe people understand it more, because, it's nuance, right? It's how it's received as well. So, and that's why I think demos can be so good, and get, a real voice actor, because, I'm not that. I could be that, but I'm not that. So, yeah, when it comes to, I'm going to have to give up my turn because I don't want to forget what it was I wanted to say. Yeah.
That's allowed. Stacy.
If nobody else has something to say, I want to shift a little bit to something that was said yesterday. I want to clarify. I think it was Josh. I don't remember who said it, but the idea of everybody getting equal time came up. And I remember I said something that might have been like, why would she say that? Where I said, I don't know that everybody should get equal time. So I want to clarify that, okay? I think that everyone should get an equal, oh, what a sweetheart. I think that everyone should get an equal block of time in terms of how they get to spend the time. So I guess what I'm saying is, let's say we each had, I don't know, 10 units. That doesn't mean I want to use all 10 of my units, but I want to be able to give those units away to people that I choose to give it away. Meaning, so I don't believe that everybody should have equal time. If some person comes on and they're absolutely not saying anything, they're just saying a bunch of words, I don't think they should get the same amount of time as somebody else who's making a point in that time. But I do think they should have the ability to say, I don't have anything to say, but I really want to hear what Josh has to say. So I'm giving him 5 minutes of my time. And that might change, it might change depending on what the discussion is. So I wanted to clarify, because I do think there should be equality in terms of decision-making, which is really happening like on a subconscious level. It's sort of like, how do I explain what I'm trying to say? I think we should all be valued equally, but that doesn't mean that we all contribute value in the same way. I'll stop there because that's the best I can define it.
That raises an important issue about who controls the allocation of time. It doesn't really crop up until somebody's hogging the show. Albert.
I'll jump in. I remembered, if I'm allowed. I wrote it down. So it comes down to, again, we all agree that we want better. I don't think anyone here can define it. And then if we agree together, when we try to actually go out, Alex, and influence others, not just keep it to ourselves, but say, hey, I've got something. I might not have everything, but I got something. And I'd like to influence people with this something. As soon as you go out into the public with that, you are open for all the criticism in the world, as Barry said. When you put a particular standpoint of a character on Wikipedia, all the adversaries will come to play. And so that's what I'm talking about, this all thing. It's all good in your head. But as soon as you actually take it out and try to, catch a fish, you'll find out that this current is really strong, and you'll have to come back with another fishing pole, and you just have to keep trying, keep fishing, because there is no easy way. And shooting fish in a barrel really isn't an option, because that ruins the ecosystem. So there are ways to carpet bomb and do things like that. But I'm thinking we can think of all kinds of things that are not better, but come up with something we can all agree that is better. And even the things that that's what I mean. You get together, you have the discussion. I say A, somebody else says A prime, somebody else says A double prime. Before too long, you're on to something that doesn't resemble A at all. It's like now B. And it's so different. There's no mapping back. There's no relational frame. There's no model. There's no language. There's no reason. And they just say, well, you're wrong, I'm right. And then, then they keep plagiarizing the Hammurabi through the generations. Because, I think, that was another comment I had. I think earlier people were saying that about a more modern thing, and I was just going to say, well, that just sounds like, oh yeah, plagiarizing the Hammurabi, making our own rules today. I can't remember exactly what the topic was. I have to watch back, but yeah, it's just history being plagiarized throughout history, trying to find better. And I really like, maybe this is the fourth time I mentioned this on the show, about the realization I had, or the crystallization I had reading the Sapiens book about these imagined orders, and how in the period where, societies were built and they had their norms in Greece or in India with their caste system, and these different systems of their norms at the time seemed to be natural, God-given, the way it always is. Like, come on, like, isn't that, like, surely you must realize this is the better way. Just put a couple of thousand years between that event and you'll realize how unsatisfactory that solution actually was. And even today, as Stacy pointed out, you got people who are revenge motivated, and when you're talking to them, you're not in a fair conversation. You can't get there. They're already looking for blood. They're already, or something. So how could you approach somebody who you need to have an important conversation with? You need to work something out. Well, today you get a lawyer, right? You say, well, screw it, I'm not talking with you, talk to my lawyer. But if people are to do that and think about better, that's why I think all this all talk is good in your head, but it's not good when you try to pass in the paper to the actual experiment. It's not going to compute, because defining better is probably one of the most difficult things we could do. And that's why I follow humanism, because it seems to be pointing in that direction. And the only objection I've heard to it is that it's too self-centered on humans. And I say, no, not if you think about it the way I do, because if the ecosystem isn't healthy, then I'm not healthy. So it includes the whole thing. And I don't know where I stand 100% on the veganism and farming animals. Is that our next slavery, that we're going to, in 1,000 years, look back and say, oh my God, those humans captured fenced in animals, made them do tricks, captured them into their houses. But the truth is, dogs seem to like us, so they don't seem to be hurting any. But so we can keep our dogs, but can we keep our cows? Anyway, even I guess the discussion of the differences in better come down to even a certain religion, and in that religion, differences within the church. And even within that church, there's differences between the first and second pew. And even on the pew, there's differences between the two people that sit side by side. So when people talk about all and the solution, and although I appreciate Glenn's and other people's future dreaming and trying to, like as Doug say, start empty and let's just blue sky this. What could be? That's a great thing to do if you can afford it. And then, try to work your way back. How can you implement it? Like, those are some, that's how things are. And of course, it's going to be a sign of your times, the things in your head. You're not going to invent that. It's going to be pieces of things you heard, and maybe something you dreamt about that you heard on TV that you subconsciously didn't even know you picked up. Oh, I got a great idea. No, that was your brain recalling something it heard in the background on a TV in a dream that now it's processing for you. Like, we don't know what's going on. But this all talk needs to be better qualified for me to feel like a conversation is actually happening. The intention's good, the alignment's good, but what are we doing? And I challenge Doug to help me refine the word doing so it doesn't leave a bad taste in his mouth like the word game did.
Josh, you had your hand up a ways back.
Yeah, I had it up when Colin said the word, nobody can define what's better. But the real challenge when you start looking at everyone and then globally everyone is no one person can define what's better for another person, but globally, everyone can define what it is if they feel they're heard by everybody, if you give them that opportunity. And that's like a Japanese business technique that came about in the 80s, I believe, where they started to empower people within an organization to speak up and to be heard, and incentives that say, you will be heard if you decide what's better. And if that is implemented and makes things better, then you get rewarded. And incentives for allowing people to speak up and be heard that would normally just be quiet. So I'll just say this to keep it in simple words, is the only thing evil needs is for good people to do nothing. The only thing evil needs to take over, the only thing that will keep us from being united as a human race where everybody's valued, is for the good people that believe they have a better way to just be quiet, say nothing. And I think that is the only change that I want to see, is where people that feel they have something to offer each other, or even if it's just better for themselves, but other people go, you know what, I want that too. If they're able to be heard in some sort of format or fashion where it's respected, and it could be shot down. It doesn't mean that it's better, but it means that at least someone heard them and said, you know what, that's a great idea. And it sounds ludicrous. Let's try it. You know, just the fact that if someone has an idea and other people can get behind it, even if it's a terrible idea and there's much smarter people that know it will fail, at least do that experiment. To me, that's real science, like political, like social science, is to do the experiment. That, like my dad used to tell me, it was a horrible advice, by the way, but I'm going to share it anyway, is he would say, if there's something that you know is what you're supposed to do the opposite thing and see what happens, so you can really learn what it means to make a bad decision. I thought that was horrible advice. But the idea of doing something that you're not sure if it's better, just to know yourself. I just think a lot of people listen to what someone else says is better, and they just believe that that's better, and they never try to do anything different. And that, to me, that's what I wrote in that book when I was a kid, is don't do what other people do, just do what you think is best. And that doesn't mean it's better. I just want to be clear when I'm saying, Colin, that doesn't mean it's better, but at least try to move the needle in the system, so that every once in a while, what was terrible in 1974 or what was terrible in 1989 might be amazing in 2022. Like, we change as a society and we change as our belief systems. And so if we don't keep changing, that's the only constant. I think we said that yesterday in our conversation, is change. If we continue to stay static and let the older Hammurabi laws, or whatever law you want to call it, dictate our new way of being in a new, because we're always creating ourselves anew. I mean, the clothes that we're wearing now, like, I've been studying ancient history. I was up all night until 4 a.m. studying ancient history with a few nerdy friends. And there were times where the kings and queens had the color of their robes because they came from little squids that were in the Indian Ocean, that were the only things on earth that could create that color at that time period. And it was a way of powering over people. And I guess that's my point, is that there's always going to be people that learn tricks and little ways to power over each other. And if we don't speak up and say, hey, you know what, I'm not fooled by your little Hollywood movie empire that creates stories that come on my little 2D flat screen that we're all glued to because we're afraid to go hang out with each other because we think we're going to cough on each other or possibly kill each other. And those fears that we have is the thing I think that will change the world, is if we face our fears and test out and see, if you go to Compton, are they going to kill you? And I went to Compton and there were really nice people. There were some bad actors that were hanging out in the corner. They didn't attack me. I went into the 7-Eleven. I got a sandwich. The guy was nice. The other lady was rude, and went back to the house I was at. And most of the people on the way back were smiling at me. Nice people. Like, it's not a horror, like, that doesn't mean there's not a person around the corner that could kill me, but the same thing could happen in Beverly Hills, or it could happen in the middle of Wyoming. Like someone could just come out with a gun and shoot me in the face and go, oh, I thought you were a deer. So I think we have to challenge the stories that we were told and the laws that we were given in order to see if they make the world a better. To me, that's better. If that, I'm just trying to define, Colin, what I think of as better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why I said to Stacy, that's fine. I didn't mean it's fine that we're broken. It's fine that we realize that we have to start from, you know, what works locally. Like that's how it's done. Like what you're doing with the people around you. You know, I could think of a lot of things I could say about how something you can do in that situation that another person might not be so comfortable in doing, right? You're a large, intimidating individual, but you probably put a scowl on, don't fuck with me, right? Not everybody can do that when they're going some places in alleyways or whatever.
I was going to say, I put a smile, not a scowl.
Well, you use what you got to in the point, yeah. But smiles work good, but they get you in trouble too, as you know. So basically, I think the New York law is 1.2 seconds is the amount of time you're allowed to look at somebody, and then you have to look away. In India, I think it's 5 seconds you're allowed before you insult somebody to stare them down, and then you're being creepy. So, you know, yeah, if you look at somebody the wrong way, that's where the saying comes from, right? What I'm saying is global challenging conversations about all have bugs, and we're not looking at the bugs in the conversation. It's category of better error. Everybody has a different category what better is.
Hold on,
and that's just
I want to stop you because I want the flow evened out. And
yeah,
Barry raised his hand.
Please, yeah, I was going to ask Barry for an example.
Stacy raised her hand, and I'd love to give them a somewhat contemporaneous opportunity.
Yeah, so
you can go first.
Yeah,
I don't like being cut off there, Doug, because I'm almost done. So my point to Josh is that I appreciate where you're coming from, and pretty well everybody in the room. But can we realize that the all talk is dangerous, so we can be more specific? That would just help me a lot. When it comes to utopian thinking, it's futuristic thinking. There's no way to hear. If you can't put away from here to there, then it's something that I'm doing as a hobby, not as a realistic expectation. I need concreteness for realistic expectations of what's next. So there's a play in between of dreaming, designing, imagineering, and actually getting to the to-do list. And I'm saying we conflate those in big ways that confuse me. Thank you, Doug.
Barry and Stacy.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Josh says about doing what you think is best versus doing what other people advise you is the best. Because best practices, this gets down to gaming the system. The best practice to get the outcome you want is to ask for something you don't really want, but will lead to you to get what you do want, because they won't give you what you want. And that's called gaming the system. It's a pragmatic approach. And I'm disinclined to do that because I think it's a little bit unethical to ask for something you don't want, expecting that will end up giving you what you do want. So for example, when I was indefinitely blocked by a corrupt administrator, I could have gone to the arbitration committee and asked to be unblocked. But that's not what I wanted. Because when I was blocked, the question in my mind was that an example of what Wikipedia considers due process? And what I really wanted to know was, if that was due process, everybody says, oh yeah, that was due process, then I don't want to be involved in Wikipedia. But if it wasn't due process, then it's not about me getting unblocked because of a departure from due process, it's getting the problem of no due process fixed first. So I propose to go to ARPCOM and say, ARPCOM, take a look at where I was blocked. Tell me, was that a normative example of what you consider due process? And Wikipedia, ARPCOM declined to answer that question. And in discussing the fact that I asked that question and ARPCOM declined to answer it, a former member of ARPCOM said to me, Barry, if you had simply asked to be unblocked, they would have taken up your case. But if you ask them, was that due process, that sets them at a more difficult job, because then they have to look at the whole system, and they don't want to do that. So the best practice for me was an ineffective practice, and the practice I was advised is not what I wanted. I didn't want to be unblocked for one instance where the system would recurrently engage in lack of due process. You see why? If I can get unblocked once, they can block me again for the same, spurious sham. I wanted the sham fixed. Then if they can fix the sham, now I can say, okay, now can you correct the mistake of the sham? And now I will continue with Wikipedia. It didn't happen.
Doug, I would really like to give my time to you. I would really like you to address that, especially in terms of what is it somebody really wants.
Well, that's, you sort of know me well.
Yes, I do.
So I loved Alex's example relating to Kentucky Fried Chicken. And if Kentucky Fried Chicken didn't announce a general solicitation for replacement seasoning for their fried chicken product, then walking in the door with, I got this packet of seasonings, may not be received or welcomed. And the person, Barry, that came back to you with, you're asking about due process is out of frame for them. If you ask to be restored, then they can deal with that. 99.9% likely, not only can they deal with that, but they would have restored you. They would have unblocked you. And from that place, you could have then inquired into what are your current existing orientations, practices, and approaches from a place of genuine curiosity in relation to domains, like this. Like, how do you determine things that get blocked? How do you determine things that are okay and not okay? How do you determine who can and can't do what and where, and all of that? So I would absolutely, to Stacy's prompt, suggest that wasn't your goal. Your goal was to go to battle. And if you walk in the door and out of the box, the first thing you do is throw the first spear or declare war, you're going to get what you asked for.
Going to get what?
You're going to get exactly what you asked for.
You're
going to find yourself at war. And if you pick a particularly big foe, you're going to lose. You'll get killed. Now, you can continue to pound at the gates, going, not fair, not fair, not fair, not fair, not fair. But for anybody who's on the other side of those gates, you're invisible, you're ineffectual, and you're not affecting any change. You're not, in fact, contributing value to moving the dial or transforming the subject that was the catalyst for all this. What you've done is affirmed your own vision of you as this warrior of the faith for and on behalf of, fill in the blanks that are your most cherished totems. So my experience and awareness and understanding of you, and because of the nature of this space and because of the fundamental, I believe the fundamental understanding everyone who comes here knows, is that each of us comes from love for the others. That this is a pattern that you like creating wars. You like creating battles. You like creating conflicts. You've developed a lot of skill at not just starting them, but fanning the flames and escalating things and bringing other people in and creating audiences or creating arbiters or creating judges or creating allies or drafting allies into your causes. And it's a pattern. I don't think, although you consistently have a narrative to root it in, that is an intellectual thing or a moral or an ethical or whatever is. But at the end of the day, the hidden goal is to generate a war in which you are the righteous, moral, ethical Don Quixote. And, I can count probably 3 or 4 or 5 of those over the last year or two that, I could identify where the common denominator in all of them is you finding a toehold or a spark to hang your hat on from a moral or ethical wrong orientation or perspective or judgment. And then we're off to the races. and generally the people around it or the people on the other side of it or the whatever, all they can do is sort of go for the arc and the ride. So that's my experience of these things with you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. My perspective was not about whether I was wronged. The question was, is the system flawed in a fundamental way, which I was just a random, happenstantial victim, but it wasn't about fixing the case for me. It was about, is the system flawed? And if so, can I diagnose the system or get an acknowledgement of the defect in the system? Because if they only say, well, we're going to make an exception for you and let you have a pass, then everybody else is going to run into the same issue. So I thought, I want to find out if this issue of due process is systemic. Turned out it was. And a couple of people even admitted it. Powerful people said, yeah, we don't do due process. We don't have a governance model. You got a sham deal. And that's just business as usual here. And ARPCOM's not going to address that. And I go, okay, then I don't want to be a part of Wikipedia because you got a dysfunctional system. But first I wanted to find out, was it me or was it the system? And the answer was the system is unfixable. Okay, then it's pointless to try to get unblocked so I could try to fix the system from inside. I didn't. I went outside.
I see Josh's hand and also Colin's, but I just want to close a circle that's perfect here. So, in the face of an expression of futility, that's the system. It's fucked up. It's big. It's bureaucratic, and it's never going to change. They're going to, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy for them and for you in terms of frustration and purpose.
Self-fulfilling, it's still true.
And understood. And to Josh's earlier point, I don't accept absolutes of can't change and failure any more than Colin's reactivity to broad, I forget his exact languaging, but, broad statements of all and everybody that are, rooted from his belief system and frame of
Reason
reference,
for everything.
that are projected as utopian and fantasy and not rooted, whatever. So I'm a big believer in what Josh alluded to earlier, which is whether it pokes people's beliefs or provokes fears or whatever, the saying of it isn't, it doesn't stop me from opening my mouth. So I'm in the middle of a 3-part series on leadership and the suggestion of a non-leadership future in large organizations.
Yeah, peer to peer.
And there are a few people that are, at the forefront of organizational change transformation, very reputable, very much of my tribe in terms of seeing organizations as organisms, living things. And one of them, in response to my suggestion that the problem is actually with leadership, it's with this stirring in of power, control, authority into everything.
Yeah.
And so people need to be led or managed. Well, if you believe that, then you're going to create a global population of people that need to be led or managed. If you have the power and authority and control to make them supplicant, like that's our order right now, like that's what's been. Okay. So his response to me in suggesting that the problem lies with the leadership, power, control, authority ingredient of that as the toxic element. And his complaint to me was, that's not being compassionate and empathetic for the leaders. I kid you not. And this is a guy who considers himself at the forefront of humanizing leadership and organizational transformation, whatever. And his response was that how could I not be more compassionate and empathetic for the leadership class who I am suggesting are the source of 99% of the problems in our world today.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron.
And my answer, I actually didn't answer him because I have compassion and empathy for him being incapable of escaping the old paradigm frame that has him holding so much heart for the exercise of power, control, and authority over other people. Yeah. Right? I didn't have the heart to say to him, man, you're a dinosaur rooted in the old element. So how do you think any of the things you're selling and experimenting and presenting to the world, and by the way, the elaborate system you're now constructing to bring to the world to solve all these all the crap of the old paradigm, but and what exactly do you think makes what you're bringing and what you're doing different, which it isn't, and all of that, right? So I don't think that should stop me from writing the articles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right.
And I don't throw stones at leaders or people that are vested in leaderships and leadership training and leadership development and leadership. There's nothing projective or judgmental that I'm caring about what they're doing. Do I have a little in the back of my mind, forgive them for they know not what they do? Yeah, but I do have utmost compassion and empathy for people, trapped in the old frame. Yeah. But
it's sad.
But did he experience my share as personally directed at him on an emotional and experiential level in that moment? Absolutely, yes. And Barry, I recognize that my challenge and goal, if I aspire to change what I'm describing, to affect it in a positive way, I need to figure out how to communicate and share what I'm looking to communicate and share without pushing those buttons or triggering that response in the guys just like him. It's my job, if I want to affect a change, I have to figure out how to be able to do that without evoking and triggering that hurt, that pain, that resistance, that block, all of that stuff. Not in service to them, not in service to me, and not in service to the change I'm trying to bring to the world. So if you, instead of validating the data point that it's a corrupt piece of shit in Wikipedia, had come from, okay, how could I actually get inside and into complete picture and understanding of what ails and afflicts them that has them with this level of dysfunction in this way? And how could I help them evolve new systems? How can I join them in fixing the problem, co-creating the solution? So I offer that to you because in my universe, I always consider it on me to bridge, on me to eliminate anything that triggers or that evokes that, that's just the fucked up and that's the way it is and you'll have to live with it. And how to get inside the people that are holding those reins and how to create space to enable them to do what they're doing better in whatever context. Sorry for the length of that. I didn't mean to.
When it's my turn, I'll respond to that, but other people.
Well, Colin had his hand up and somebody else had their hand up.
I think Stacy put her.
Addressed it. You addressed it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was really good, Doug. I think that set a nice tone of better way of approaching things. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it's pretty well in alignment with the question I asked yesterday about how can people with different points of view come together and disagree better so that they don't end up disrespecting each other just because they have different points of view unnecessarily, right? Like there's some points of view that are just opposite. I talk about those all the time because those are my test cases for, is a fair conversation working? People don't like me going over my test cases. I have another test case that I could bring up that would make everybody automatically visceral. Anybody with any conscience or morality, as far as I'm concerned, bring up this topic and I start talking about it. But then you got to think about the individuals who actually are afflicted by that particular thing. Can we have sympathy for them? Or is their brain too chemically deranged to actually become a lemming? They're just not a lemming anymore. And that's, are we sheep? Are many people sheep? Doug says, if we make a world where people are trained to be sheep, then we'll make sheep. Well, I think people are generally looking for an easy way and they'll latch onto another way. I think that's our survival mechanism, is to be like monkeys or copycats or sheep. But sheep I think are different than monkeys, because I think monkeys will, scream and say, I'm going a different way today, where sheep, they don't know any better. They just keep chewing and walking like lemmings to the ideology, which forms their brain. And they come up against a different ideology and they can't relate to it. And so Doug is saying, how can I have a fair conversation with somebody whose ideology does not relate to mine? The way they think that people should be guided and fostered and mentored and helped to collaborate is different than the way I think that it should be done. And we're just at odds about that. Like, I think that's what Barry was talking about with the scientists who died, believing they until the people actually died, did the controversy die down. So what I really wanted to say was that I'm thinking that Doug characterized Barry in a manner that was a bit towards his framing and intention of point, but I would like to add a different framing and defend Barry as a fellow truth warrior. I just think that the problem is style and tactic. It's very hard to become an influencer or to get a union or an Occupy Wall Street going, right? Like, if you had Occupy Wall Street happening, would Jimmy Wales have thought differently about the ethics? And I'm a strong believer that we're getting technology strong enough that if Wikipedia isn't going to satisfy the truth needs of the people, hopefully Wikipedia will get obsolete with something better. Fork Wikipedia and away they go. Although the influence thing is really hard. I don't want to get into some of the stuff that I just learned about that. But yeah, and that goes to Alex as well. It's about influence with the peer-to-peer and scaling these things. Like, yeah, if you had the website that everybody was looking at, then you get the $1 billion money to make whatever idea you were thinking about work. You could just sat back smoking the cigar saying, I had a great idea. but it's really the influence of people being satisfied that makes it happen. You know, the investors come in, the programmers come in who don't write no code programs, right? They're gonna write programs. No code programs are great for simple sites and maybe integration of known standards. And it's going somewheres with AI. AI is kind of like that on steroids, but you know, somebody wrote the program first. And I think this no code thing is another misnomer when you get down to actually trying to make things better and not just follow along like a sheep. I might be a little bit off on that statement. So in essence, when we're talking about all and everything, or when we are talking about better, I would like to see it wrapped in a nice little story that says it doesn't work all the time, but when you're in this situation dealing with Wikipedia, you kind of got to act like Barry, because otherwise you're just going to be forgiven and become a sheep within the Wikipedia farm. And Barry says, I don't want to be part of this farm the way that this is running. This is inhumane. It's unethical. In fact, I wrote a learning article on how one should go about the ethics. I've consulted with professionals, and this is a good product. I think we should build this and break farther. And they said, no, we're going to overrule you and you don't matter. And that's the unfair conversation I'm saying that he was up against. So I would think you too, Doug, in that situation would be, I would like to, because it is a good, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that when you get blocked and shut down, do you just burn it and say, forget it? Or do you say, I'm standing up for the other people, my other brethren? You know, reminds me of Martin Luther King a little bit. You know what I mean? Like somebody has to do it. Did he do it for himself? I don't think so. That would have been too easy, right? No, it's hard to stand in defiance, or what's the word, dissent. And while we're talking about old world systems and old hierarchy and old frames, I'm thinking it's a percentages game, not an all game. And it'd just be nice if we could be clear about that stuff. Like when Tom Osher was talking about the CIA corrupt to the core, and then it's funny, you know, well, there's two people in this room that actually work for the CIA and they're not corrupt to the core. They people who rail against the government, but they don't realize that most of the government is civil servants who are in fear, can't say anything politically, or they lose their jobs. So yeah, there is a problem with the fourth wall. And I'm hoping, Doug, the leader thing will turn out so that we have micro leaders that are driven by creativity and what's needed. And there's no power over macro leaders, no monopoly leaders. And so I think the word leader has to be rebranded from oligarch, because leaders are becoming oligarchs in our day. I think there always has been with kings. And so maybe we're going somewheres where we can coexist. And that's what the dream is for me here. How do we figure out the fact that, like the conversation with Stacy, when I say, you know, okay, that's a good place to start, but what do we do with it? And then somebody comes and starts talking about, well, if we all just dream a better world, it's like, no. What are we going to do about trying to frame this? And I'm saying, what I'm going to do about it is make a conversation tool that when you get into an important conversation, it will show you where the slippery places are and where you want to be careful and reframe that, because you just got gaslighted, or somebody just used their religion over you, or you're being leaded to question. You just got an ad hominem. You just got conflicted with this. And all those things get filtered out. So the assholes trying to manipulate the conversation just get hearing the sound, try again, try again. Because shunning somebody's not good. Giving them an opportunity to improve, I think, is where the real quality of a system is. So, and who's got the time for it, right? Like, what do you do with all the flat earthers who are coming over the hill? I don't know. Are they actually coming over the hill? Are they our enemies, Doug? I don't know. Depends on the day, right? Okay, I'm done and done.
Josh, did you want to say something before I respond to? No, okay. Great.
Go ahead. She's waking up.
So I want to respond to Doug's counsel. Even though I had asked not to be unblocked, but whether or not that was due process, and ArbCom says we're not going to take up that question, a group of administrators independently discussed it in the administrator's notice board. And within that discussion, which I was not present because I'm blocked, but I could read it, the group of editors who wanted me banned thought that if I had asked to be unblocked, the only reason that they would agree to unblock me is if I would assent to the process that they had enacted. Of course, which I would not have done because it's not a process that I would sign on to. But nonetheless, there was that discussion among the administrator's notice board in which I learned that forget about due process. We don't have it. It's not even part of the architecture of the system. Yeah, it was a sham, but ArbCom's not going to deal with that. It is what it is. Okay, deal with it. So at that point, even if I had been unblocked and then attempted to change the governance model within Wikipedia itself, that would have been a rather fruitless and pointless exercise. But there was another site also run by Wikimedia called MetaWiki. And MetaWiki is about Wikipedia. It's sort of this overview discussion of about what's going on in Wikipedia. So I first went there and I brought the story over there. And again, I was told, this is too big of an issue. Don't try to bring it up here. It's just going to be too controversial. And it's not going to get you anywhere. So then somebody said, well, there's this other tiny little project called Wikiversity. It's also part of Wikimedia, tiny little thing. And there you can write academic course material on academic topics. And it doesn't have the same rules as Wikiversity. So a group of us, I wasn't the only one, a group of us went to Wikiversity to figure out how can we present the story of why accuracy, excellence, and ethics is a useful subject to introduce into the culture. So a bunch of us signed on to write a course on mass media ethics and to introduce this simply as an abstract academic subject. And I was a participant in it, partly because one of my best friends on the internet taught ethics in journalism, online journalism. So I had all the material from her course. So we were writing this article on just simply the elements of online mass media ethics. And one of the custodians, which is like an administrator on Wikiversity, says, well, this is all well and good. It's perfectly academic. It's what you would learn in college, but you should give us some examples. Can you give us some examples of where Wikipedia falls short? And I said, well, yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm here. So foolishly, I responded to the custodian's request to provide examples from my experience. And when I did that, the corrupted men's caught wind of it, and they came like a guerrilla squad into Wikiversity and attempted to shut it down. And they not only did they attempt to shut it down, they called in Jimmy Wales to help them shut it down. And Jimmy Wales not only threatened to shut down Wikiversity entirely, but Jimmy Wales personally wrote to me, is beyond the scope of the project, meaning the Wikimedia project. At which point, and then having said that, Jimmy Wales, the God King, personally site banned me from all Wikimedia sites, just totally out of process. Just says, I'm telling you that ethics is beyond the scope. I'm the God King. I'm banning you entirely from anything Wikipedia, news, Wiki News, Meta, everything. So at that point, I said, wow, this is really big. And I discovered that there were external sites full of people who had criticisms of Wikipedia, one of which was called Wikipedia Review. And I went there and I told my story there, and I found all kinds of other people who had very similar experiences on Wikipedia Review. I was there for, I guess, about 2 years. And we realized that, all these people have these systemic complaints and they're just going around in circles. And finally, several of the organizers of Wikipedia Review split from the organizer and started a new site called Wikipediocracy, which started in 2012. By the time they started that, I was basically out of the picture. Wikipediocracy is still existing today. And if you go to the site, you say, this is a site of people who are critical of the processes of Wikipedia, and they continue to present exact stories that are parallel to the ones that I was observing and participating in, and and one notch aside of. So here it is, literally a decade later, and nothing's changed. So the fact that I didn't try to stay inside the system, first of all, I couldn't have, because Jimbo Wales site banned me. And even if I had, that hasn't changed.
Understood.
I was one little guy.
Yeah, just so you know, I'm not bringing any woulda, coulda, shouldas or projections onto you, or what you should have done or should have done differently, or how you did whatever you did. I have no judgments of any of that. I really don't have a judgment of you in relation to, what happened and the way you dealt with it as it flowed. And there are situations where, you confront an immovable force that basically not interested.
Exactly.
And in those situations, I, at the earliest, basis for recognizing that, I move on.
Yeah.
I mean,
So it was a decade ago.
Yeah. So just so you understand, I'm not coming from a place of like you woulda, coulda, shoulda, or had any obligation to do anything differently than you did.
I didn't do things optimally. I wouldn't have succeeded anyway.
I hear you. So we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I've got a hard stop.
Oh, okay.
Because I've got a sort of critical situation in Ecuador. I'm juggling with some people down there, and but I would love to invite in the remaining 8 minutes or so any closing
We let
shares.
Carl talk. We didn't
Closing,
really.
closing shares or comments from anyone who would like to make them.
Yeah, okay. I think everything was really great between you and Barry, as far as I'm concerned, my opinion, except for the point where you suggested his theory of mind was wanting, and he agreed to it, but I don't know if he was agreeing to everything. I think he was agreeing in spirit of him wanting to be the battling victor. And he said, first thing he said when he said he's not doing it for himself, he's doing it for, truth and correcting, seeing if he can actually correct the system. Now I know he probably takes some inverse umbrage from it if he did win, but that just goes with the feeling of satisfaction, which is a wonderful thing. But is he trying to be the great warrior, the egotist? I don't think so. And I heard you judge him that that's what he wanted. So maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but that was you projecting, Doug. I just want to point that out, that I wonder how you qualify that as non-projection, or is it just got to say it now that the pattern's repeated so many times? That's my closing. Thank you very much.
Carl, Alex, I'm not which one of you was, I guess Carl was first, Alex is second.
Yeah, so I've just kind of been observing today, wearing the white hat of the 6 thinking hats method. I got completely shot down when I tried to bring it up at one of the barn raising things, August of last year, actually. So obviously Colin and Barry are like wearing the red hat today, and I didn't want to interrupt I thought they needed to follow the passion sometimes. That's what you need to do. So maybe I can try again.
I think you should. It wasn't your fault, and it was people not being familiar with all the colors and all the coffee.
It was people projecting their thing that completely shot me down. They didn't even try. And didn't even bother to apologize.
So red is in the absence of blue, I think.
Carl, can you tell us about it in Messenger afterwards?
Yeah, because I wasn't there either. I was sorry to have missed that.
Carl and I have talked about it since. And
Hold on.
it's a real
It's
thing.
hold
It's a
on.
real
It's
thing.
It's Alex's turn for a close, and the wrap is imminent. So, Alex.
There's a meme I saw of a guy typing away, and the picture of it was from the back. You can see this guy hunched over his keyboard, typing away on the screen, something on the screen, and his wife was calling out, "Your dinner's ready. Come and get your dinner." And in the caption window, he was saying, "Hang on, wait a minute, somebody's wrong on the internet." So somebody was unethical. Somebody had done something wrong, and I could see Barry in that, and he had to correct it. It's a matter of principle, and it's an ethical duty, a moral responsibility, and that's so. Kudos for Barry. Over.
Sam, are you still here? I really wish we could continue this. That's why I want to know if he's here, because I have something burning and I would love to restart another session.
Please, I've got all afternoon.
It's
Yes,
up to
Sam's
Sam.
Still here.
Can you take over and continue after Doug has to
He
leave?
needs, Doug probably needs the room though.
Yeah, I need my account, so Sam would have to open a
Yeah, if you want,
a
I
room
could
under
set
his.
up the same barn raising link if you guys.
Yeah, just go back to switch to barn
Sweet.
raising for the next 2 hours.
Carl, do you have a few more minutes to come back?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Carl, yes, please.
Yeah, I can for a little while longer.
Please do.
And Doug, you'll have to watch it after.
I will do that, and I would also, I generally stay out of tools and barn raising, but I would be really interested in learning it, hearing about what you're talking about, Carl, and would also be willing to, potentially violate an unspoken territorial dimension and say, do it next Sunday. Take unblocking, and let's unblock you and get the offering.
I'll resume.
So I offer that if you guys don't decide to do that sooner.
Well, then the homework would be
in Saturday barn raising.
or
so
continue.
the homework would be to watch the video that he's talking about.
So
Right.
so do all of you have link for Sam's?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you put it here real
Yeah.
quick? I'll find it. Never mind. I'll be there in a minute.
I think I have it too.
So do we have a continuance thing, like an administrative continuance thing going on here, as far as if we're going to next Sunday be looking at Carl's thing, which I think the premise is his presentation during unblocking, which is actually recorded, and we could watch it like we did the Schmattenberger thing.
Yeah,
And I think what Carl's,
I'd like to get it fresh off the press.
Yeah, I was gonna,
yeah,
yeah.
So,
It
so
sounds-
that's the invitation.
I think we
Okay,
need both.
folks,
Colin,
I'm
I can only guess.
I'm gonna lead
Yeah.
you to your continuation session with Sam's room,
Yes,
and
okay.
I am gonna pull the plug on this room.
Save the
But
chat first, please.
I thank all of you. You can save it. Go to the bottom right corner.
I did.
And
I just wanna
happy
make sure.
Happy New Year to those of you who celebrate Rosh Hashanah.
Yes, and Happy New Year.
Shana
Bye
Tova,
all.
a better year. A
Year.
better
Shana
year.
Tova.
Shana Tova, a better year.
Yeah, better in a Russian framework.
Bye all.